Here we are again. Freedom Day that isn't. We did see. We were told it was data, not dates. Apart from the fact that when the data was far, far, far better than we were predicting for any of those dates, we stuck to the dates. And then when the data was actually looking perfectly good, we stuck to the data. We're told, not the dates, and extended. Do you understand why this time last year, without a vaccine, when we had 59 deaths a day, 353 daily hospital admissions, and crucially no vaccine, that the government announced on the 23rd of June that they would ease restrictions on the 4th of July, and yet today, with fewer than 10 deaths on average a day and only 177 daily hospital admissions, largely younger people, and with the vaccine, huge percentage of people, 81% of adults have had their first jab, 59% their second jab, we are still extending lockdown. Does that make sense to you?
No, it doesn't make sense, which is one of the reasons I voted against. I mean, the simple truth is you now have a group of advisors who have been proven massively cautious really throughout all this, apart from right at the very beginning when the government was a bit slow moving. In every other decision in the last year or so, the advisors have been overcautious, and that went right down to this decision. I mean, it's now known from the papers yesterday that the decision was based on forecasts which were just wrong about the operation of the vaccine. Just to remind people, the forecasts were based on the vaccines being about 86% effective, which is about 10 points lower than they are.
And that makes a huge difference to the number of people who are at risk.
Huge difference. Yeah. I mean, the most extreme forecast is the Imperial one, and basically it forecasts 200,000 deaths. That's about 8 to 10 times too high. The more accurate, the more modest forecasts, they're about 6 times too high. So it's making decisions on nonsense data. We all know the old computer thing of garbage in, garbage out. That's precisely the basis of this.
And again, assumptions constantly being made on computer models, on theoretical models, putting incorrect assumptions in, like the vaccine efficacy being much lower than it is, lower take up of the vaccines than we've seen. 1 million people book jabs, only at the weekend. But also ignoring the real world data. The moment the real world data comes in that gives a different impression, whether it's from Israel, that's had that massive rollout of the Pfizer, or whether it's from our own country, when the predictions of all the models were that after March the 8th, when kids went back to school, cases would go up and deaths would go up. They didn't. They went down, both of them. And again, after April the 12th, they would, and they didn't. They went down. You'd think, there's a level of arrogance here, which is that, no, my computer model that clearly has the wrong assumptions, that's clearly already been proven wrong, is definitely still the right model. Anyone else in any other walk of life would probably be out of a job by now.
Yes, the trouble is the incentives for the scientific advisors is always to be too high. They are terrified of underestimating the risk and then being blamed for an outcome. The truth is we live in a society where there are risks of all sorts, whether it's risks of flu, risks of car accidents, all sorts of risks. We don't shut the entire economy down for those. Now, okay, when COVID was going flat out and we had no vaccines, then there's an argument. But when we are in a position where we're just about the best in the world at the vaccines, all care of Kate Bingham, who made a fantastic set of decisions, now we ought to be taking advantage of that. And the truth is, we cannot achieve zero COVID. Even if we could in this country, it would then come again, the next wave somewhere else. We cannot achieve zero COVID. What we've got to be able to do is come to terms with the disease being there in the long term.
But we're constantly told that. We're told that by the Prime Minister. We're told that by Sir Patrick Vallance and Professor Chris Whitty again and again. They do a press conference. They say we need to learn to live with this virus. And indeed, the Prime Minister, after we had that reopening of retail and outdoor hospitality on April the 12th, the day after, he said, we're going to have to accept that, deaths will rise and cases will rise, and we have to learn to live with this. They keep telling us that, and then they do the exact opposite when cases do up. Even with cases going up and the concerns of the Indian variant, we are still looking at far lower case rates, way lower hospitalisation rates, and way lower death rates than were predicted by any model. We are better than the best case scenario still, even with the Indian variant, and yet we're still in a version of lockdown. But
Yeah, and there's one. There's
where
one.
when
There's,
are the I mean, the goalposts haven't just been moved, to the side. They're not in the same football stadium anymore.
Well, you see this with the slippery nature of the argument. In the first place, it was about deaths, and when it's about deaths, I sort of agree with being cautious. Um, then it changed to, well, protect the NHS, fine, but then it changed to, well, we've got to have enough NHS capacity to recover all the things we haven't done. Well, if that was really the argument, we should be reorganising the health service now.
Well, this is
having
it. This is
specialist
going to be
COVID
the
hospitals.
justification for going into lockdown. I have not a shadow of a doubt in my mind that we will be back in lockdown in autumn and winter. Cases will go up. It's a seasonal respiratory virus, and if it's not cases of COVID going up, it'll be a hell of a lot of cases of flu. Many experts have been predicting because of having people being in lockdown and the like, and not seeing flu at all last year, and therefore it will come back with a vengeance. That's what happens. But this is it. We are not seeing a plan. I mean, there's even talk today about how, we're going to talk to Chris Hobson from NHS providers very soon. Not being a proper plan for rolling out the booster jabs. We are not seeing the ramping up of the hospital care to ramp up to deal with the urgent routine, millions of people on waiting lists, or to provide for the winter again. We're going to be told yet again the NHS hasn't prepared. It's in chaos. It's underfunded. We'll be told, and we'll have to lock down again to protect the NHS. When do we as a nation expect the NHS to protect us rather than the other way round?
Yeah, well, there's one element of it. I mean, it's not for me to tell you what questions to ask, but when you next get a minister on, ask them, why haven't they reinstated the Nightingales and used them as admission wards for COVID, not as overspill, and then you can continue to use the rest of the hospital system for normal things. There's no sign of that. No. If you were really serious about this argument, we should be organising like mad at the moment to, as it were, separate the COVID stream so you don't get reinfection in hospitals again, and, as I say, use the Nightingales as admission.
And it's an absolute nonsense. We know the death rates are going down. Yeah, we're constantly told, well, the Nightingales didn't have enough staff. That's an absolute load of nonsense. There were thousands of people who volunteered to work, and they were just routinely just fobbed off. People who had all the qualifications to come back in had only left, the NHS, months earlier, who came back and were not offered work. Can I ask you about a front page story in The Guardian today? Ministers tell Johnson, consult the entire cabinet, not just the number 10 clique. I've been talking about this for quite a while because cabinet minister after cabinet minister is telling me when a decision is made about their particular area of responsibility, they're brought into a meeting. Michael Gove is chairing those meetings. He gets a very, very easy ride in the media, if you ask me. Got a very easy ride from Dominic Cummings. Barely a mention in that 7 hours of criticism of everyone else being an idiot. And Matt Hancock, Michael Gove are in those meetings, a bunch of officials who have all been briefed in advance. Minister gets 10 minutes notice of some data, doesn't get the raw data, just gets given a pretty graph, and then they're bounced into a decision. Cabinet basically are nodding dogs and just rubber stamping everything. We have lost cabinet government now.
Well, we've lost parliamentary government and we've lost cabinet government by the sounds of it. I'm able to talk about the parliamentary. I'm not that well informed on what's happening in cabinet. But there's no excuse for either. If you look at the last 18 months, with the single exception of the vaccine strategy, decision-making has not been great. Let me put it like that. Quite a lot of mistakes have been made. And yet what you're seeing is the very people who made those mistakes retaining, as it were, an iron grip on the decision mechanism. And that's wrong. I mean, that's why I complain about Parliament being sidelined, because the very fact of being dragged to the House of Commons and having to face a challenging House makes you do your job better, I promise you. Makes the civil servants work harder. I promise you that too. Yeah. And the same thing happens in with having wider cabinet government. It's better government. It's not just caring about whether this or that cabinet is being treated fairly. It's better government when cabinet government works properly. And it's time we got back to it pretty quickly.
Yeah, indeed. Just finally, what do you make of the G7 summit? And we saw those images, everyone with the ridiculous elbow bumping and wearing masks. And as soon as they thought the cameras were off them at a barbecue, clearly these world leaders don't think these masks and social distancing is necessary because they're not doing it. Maybe because they're all double jabbed. Well, so are millions of us, and yet we're told we still have to go through these terrible, jump over these all these obstructions. And now we've got to talk about UEFA officials, 2,500 of them, the great and the good, the sponsors, the VIPs being allowed to come into the country. Government hasn't okayed this, but I have no doubt at all they'll come up with some ruse to get it through. But allowed to come into the country, watch the Euros final in July, and then leave again, but not having to self self-isolate, when millions of families would have to do that and pay a fortune to be off work and pay for tests. Should that be allowed to happen, or should we use that as perhaps a springboard for us all having those freedoms? But what do you make of that?
Well, I wouldn't allow it to happen because I think it's a reflection of the rather patronising nature of the whole approach of not just this government, all governments. All Western governments certainly have behaved like this. The Eastern ones have behaved worse in some ways, but the all Western governments have behaved in a very patronising way. Take one issue, this issue of theatres, which Lloyd Webber's been talking about this week. The truth is, we can say to people, take responsibility for your own health. If you really are in the risk groups, and we know very, very clearly who they are now, and even if you've been vaccinated, don't go to a crowded theatre, don't go to a crowded pub. People have to be given back responsibility for their own lives. That's what freedom is. That's one of the things that distinguishes this country through hundreds of years from most other countries.
Well, it used to.
It used to, yeah, and we've got to get back to that. And this is not the government giving us back our freedom; it's our freedom in the first place.
Are you still wearing a face mask, David?
Yeah, I wear a face mask when I go out, but it's mostly for protecting other people.
Have you been double jabbed?
Yeah, long time ago.
So what are you protecting other people from?
Well, just because a double jab doesn't, it's about 80% protection from picking up the disease at all. It's 90-something% against hospitalisation and death. So there's a very, very small risk. It's a courtesy. It's nothing more than a courtesy, Julia.
But if it's a courtesy, should it be mandated by law?
No, I don't think so.
What do you think of people who are saying today, I'm done, I'm ditching my mask, I will not wear a mask anymore? Some people using the medical exemption, which if it causes you severe distress, you are entitled to exempt yourself, no doctor's letter at all. We'll talk about this a little bit later in the show. But what do you make of people doing that?
Well, I wouldn't do that, frankly, myself. But it's a very good demonstration of why we need to relax the rules to a rational level now. Because what's going to happen is that society is going to cease to obey it. Now, you might at some point in the future, not with this pandemic, but at some point in the future, you might have to reinstate rules like this. If we have some future pandemic, it's not going to work so well if you leave them in place when people patently think they're unnecessary. You are undermining your own ability to govern the country.
Yeah, but again,
so it's done.
It's interesting you say that we might need these restrictions again. We didn't need them.
Not on this pandemic.
Don't think we will need them again, but we're going to have them again. Thank you very much. Always good to talk to you. Former Brexit Secretary, Tory MP, voted against that extension of lockdown. David Davis.